Isabella Kingsley didn't know the man whose breakfast table she was serving at was Seoul's most feared crime lord. Didn't know his 7-year-old deaf son was the only soft spot in a heart made of ice and violence. What she did know, in the split second she saw the gun raised behind the boy, was that she was about to take a bullet for a child she barely knew. And the look on Yoo Joon-seo's face when her blood hit his marble floor would change both their lives in ways neither could escape. Welcome to Afro-Korea Stories by Yem, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. The first time Isabella saw the house, she thought it looked like a fortress. Gray stone walls rising 3 stories high, security cameras tracking every angle, guards stationed at gates that opened only after 3 separate identity confirmations. The employment agency had warned her this placement was different. High-profile client, they'd said. Strict confidentiality requirements. Excellent pay, but demanding expectations. She'd signed the papers without hesitation because rent in Seoul didn't care about her reservations, and her student visa only allowed part-time work that barely covered her tiny studio apartment in Hongdae. She'd come to Korea 6 months ago to finish her degree in international business, but the scholarship that was supposed to cover living expenses had fallen through at the last minute. Pride kept her from calling her parents back in Atlanta. They'd sacrificed enough sending her to university in the first place. She could handle this. She would handle this. Mrs. Cho, the head of household staff, met her at the service entrance. The older woman's face was stern, her posture rigid with the kind of authority that came from years of managing a large estate. You will address the master as sir at all times. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not enter the family wing without explicit permission. You will not ask questions about the master's business or personal affairs. Is that understood? Yes, ma'am. The young master is not to be disturbed. He has special needs and prefers to be left alone. If you encounter him, you will nod respectfully and continue with your duties without interaction. Something in the way Mrs. Cho said special needs made Isabella's chest tighten, but she nodded again. I understand. Her first week passed in a blur of work. Dusting, polishing, organizing, moving through rooms that were more museum than home. Everything was pristine, expensive, cold. She rarely saw the master, only heard his voice occasionally drifting from behind closed doors. Deep, controlled, the kind of voice that made people straighten their spines and choose words carefully. But she saw the boy. He appeared in doorways, silent as a ghost. 7 years old, with serious eyes that watched her work with an intensity that felt too old for his small face. He never made a sound, never approached, just observed from a distance before disappearing again. Isabella recognized what she was seeing. The perfect stillness, the way his eyes followed mouths when staff members spoke near him, the isolation that surrounded him like a physical barrier. She'd known another deaf child once, her younger cousin Marcus, back in Atlanta. The family had rallied around him, learned sign language together, made sure he never felt alone in his silence. But here, this boy existed in a bubble of careful avoidance. Staff members skirted past him without acknowledgement. Mrs. Cho spoke about him in third person, even when he was in the room. No one looked at him directly, as if his disability was something shameful that polite people pretended not to notice. On her 8th day, everything changed. She was cleaning one of the second-floor sitting rooms, her back to the door, when she felt someone watching. She turned to find the boy standing in the doorway, closer than he'd ever been before. Close enough that she could see the wariness in his expression, the hope fighting with learned caution. She smiled, just a small, gentle smile, nothing more. His eyes widened. His head tilted slightly, as if she'd done something unexpected, as if kindness was a foreign language he didn't quite trust. Mrs. Cho's voice cut through the moment like a blade. I told you not to bother the young master. The boy is not to be disturbed. I wasn't disturbing him, ma'am. I was just... The young master doesn't interact with staff. Continue your work." But as Isabella returned to polishing the furniture, she felt the boy's eyes still on her. And she understood something Mrs. Cho's warnings hadn't prepared her for. This child wasn't avoiding people. People were avoiding him. That afternoon she encountered him again, this time in a hallway near his room. He wasn't just watching now, he was blocking her path, standing directly in her way with an expression that was part challenge, part question. She stopped, waited, gave him space to move if he wanted to. He didn't move. Instead, he pointed at her, then at the floor, then at himself, a question without words. "What are you? What am I? What is this?" Isabella set down her cleaning supplies. Slowly, carefully, she raised her hands. Her fingers formed shapes she hadn't made in years, movements that came back to her like muscle memory from another lifetime. She signed a single word. "Friend." The boy's reaction was immediate. His mouth opened, his eyes went wide. His hands flew up, fingers forming shapes that she recognized, words that tumbled out faster than she could fully follow. "You know. You understand. Nobody here understands. Nobody talks to me. Nobody." She held up one hand gently, signed back. "Slow down. Yes, I understand. Yes, I can talk with you." He stopped. His whole body seemed to vibrate with contained energy, with hope that had been locked away so long it didn't know how to exist freely. Then he signed very carefully, very deliberately. "What's your name?" She fingerspelled it for him, letter by letter. "Isabella." He repeated it back, his small hands forming each letter with precision. Then he signed, "I'm June. Do you have to leave now?" Her heart cracked at the desperation in his face, the terror that this unexpected connection might disappear as quickly as it came. "I have work to finish, but I'm not leaving. I work here now." His smile, when it came, transformed his entire face. It was the smile of a child who'd been drowning and just felt solid ground under his feet for the first time. "Mrs. Cho says I'm not supposed to bother the staff. She says I make people uncomfortable." "You don't make me uncomfortable." "Why not?" She paused, choosing her signs carefully. "Because I once knew someone like you. Someone who taught me that silence doesn't mean empty. Sometimes silence is full of words that others can't hear." He studied her face for a long moment, then signed. "Who was it? The person you knew?" The question hit harder than she'd expected. "Someone I lost. Someone I wish I could have helped more." Before he could ask more, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Heavy footsteps, the kind that made the boy's expression change immediately from open curiosity to guarded neutrality. A man appeared in the doorway, tall, sharp-suited, with eyes that scanned the room with the careful attention of someone trained to spot threats in empty spaces. His gaze landed on the boy first, then shifted to Isabella, still kneeling on the floor with her hands frozen mid-sign. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "What's happening here?" His voice was quiet, carefully controlled, the kind of quiet that was more dangerous than shouting. Isabella stood immediately, bowing her head. "I was just cleaning, sir. The young master was—" "Was what?" He stepped into the room. "Bothering you?" "No, sir, not at all." His eyes narrowed. He looked at his son, then back at her, and something shifted in his expression. Confusion, maybe, or suspicion. "You were using your hands, why?" She kept her voice steady. "I was just communicating with the young master, sir. He seemed to want to ask something." "Communicating?" He repeated the word as if testing it for traps. "You know sign language?" "Yes, sir." "How?" The question hung in the air between them. How did a housekeeper from an employment agency know sign language? How did she happen to be the first person in this house who could speak to a child everyone else had written off as too difficult to reach? She met his eyes directly. A calculated risk. "I learned it a long time ago, sir, for personal reasons." He studied her for what felt like an eternity. She could feel him weighing her answer, measuring her words against whatever calculations ran through his mind. This was a man who'd built his life on reading people, on knowing when they were lying, on sensing problems before they materialized. Finally, he spoke. "My son doesn't need distractions." "Yes, sir." She kept her voice neutral, professional, but inside something cracked. "My son doesn't need distractions." As if connection was a distraction. As if his child's desperate loneliness was something to be managed rather than healed. The man turned to leave, then stopped. Without looking back, he said, "If he seeks you out again, you may respond. But your work comes first." It wasn't permission. It was a test. She understood that immediately. "Yes, sir." He left without another word. But Ji-yoon was still standing there, and when their eyes met, the boy signed something that made her chest tighten. "That's my father. He's afraid of me." "No, Ji-yoon, he's not afraid of you." "Then why won't he look at me? Why won't he learn to talk to me?"
She had no answer that wouldn't hurt him more, so instead she signed, "Sometimes grown-ups forget how to connect. They get so busy protecting people that they forget how to love them." He considered this, his young face far too serious. Then he signed, "Will you teach him to talk like this? I don't think your father wants to learn from someone like me." "Why?" "Because I'm staff, because I'm not from here, because I look different, because I'm nobody important." Ji-yoon's hands moved with sudden fierceness. "You're important to me." The simple declaration carried more weight than any elaborate speech. This child, isolated in his own home, surrounded by people who treated his disability like an embarrassment to be ignored, had just claimed her as someone who mattered. She signed back carefully. "Then I'll be here for you, I promise." It was a promise she would keep even when it cost her everything. Over the next 2 days, a pattern emerged. Ji-yoon would find her during her work, and they would communicate in stolen moments. A conversation while she cleaned windows, a story shared while she polished silver. He was starving for connection, and she found herself drawn deeper into his world with each exchange. But others noticed. Mrs. Cho's disapproval grew more obvious. "The young master has become attached to you. This is not appropriate." "I'm just responding when he communicates with me, ma'am. His father gave permission." "The master gives permission for many things he doesn't truly mean. Be careful. Getting too close to that child is dangerous." The warning should have been clear enough. But that afternoon, while working in the hallway outside Ji-yoon's room, Isabella overheard something that changed everything. 2 men in suits, speaking in low voices. Security personnel based on their bearing and the weapons barely concealed under their jackets. The weakness is obvious. Anyone who wants to hurt him goes through the kid. The boss knows. That's why the boy barely leaves his room, like a prisoner in his own house. Still a vulnerability. If I were planning something, that's where I'd strike. They moved on, unaware she'd heard every word. But the meaning was crystal clear. Ji-yoon wasn't just isolated because of his disability. He was isolated because his father's enemies saw him as a target. A way to break the unbreakable Yoo Joon-seo. That evening, Isabella was summoned to the master's private office. The room was all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's skyline. He sat behind a massive desk, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Cho tells me my son has become attached to you." "He's just happy to have someone who can communicate with him, sir." "Do you know what I do?" The question came out of nowhere. "Do you know who I am?" "I know you're a businessman, sir. I don't ask questions about specifics." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "A businessman, yes. That's one way to describe it." He stood, moved to the window. "My son is the only thing in this world that matters to me, the only thing I would die for. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "Yes, sir." "Then you also understand that anyone who poses a threat to him, intentional or otherwise, becomes a problem I have to solve. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was a warning, maybe a threat. I would never hurt him, sir. I believe you. He turned to face her. But belief isn't enough. I need to know why you're really here. Why someone with your education, your background, is working as domestic help in Seoul. I need to know what you're hiding. The room felt smaller suddenly. I'm not hiding anything. I'm just trying to finish my degree and pay rent. Your student visa doesn't explain the sign language proficiency. It doesn't explain why you left a full scholarship in Atlanta to come here with inadequate funding. It doesn't explain the gap in your employment history or the family connections you've severed. Her blood turned cold. He'd investigated her. Thoroughly. My cousin was deaf, she said quietly. Back in Atlanta. Marcus. We were close. I learned sign language to talk to him. Then, 3 years ago, he died in a car accident. I couldn't stay there anymore. Everything reminded me of him. So I came here. Fresh start. That's all. The truth hung between them, raw and painful. She hadn't spoken about Marcus to anyone since leaving Atlanta. The grief was still too fresh, too sharp. Yoo Joon-seo studied her for a long moment. Then, "Do you know what he said to me tonight?" She shook her head. "He wrote me a note in English because he knows I can read that, but I can't understand his hands. He wrote, 'Please don't send her away. She's the only one who talks to me. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. Just let her stay.'" His voice cracked slightly on the last words. This powerful man, this person who commanded fear and respect in equal measure, was breaking open in front of her. "Sir, I would never do anything to—" "I know." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "I know because I've been watching. Because in this house, everyone is watched. And what I've seen is my son smiling for the first time in years, laughing, acting like a child instead of a ghost." He moved to the window, staring out at the city lights. "I've been hiding from my son because looking at him hurts, because he reminds me of everything I've lost. His mother died giving birth to him, and in doing so, I've made him lose too. Lose childhood, lose joy, lose any sense of being wanted." The vulnerability in his voice was startling. This man who'd built an empire on strength and control was admitting his deepest failure to a woman he barely knew. "Your son is brilliant, sir. Kind, brave. He just needs someone to see him." "And you see him." He turned to face her fully. "There are threats, real threats against this family, against him specifically. My enemies know that hurting him is the fastest way to destroy me. And they're right. If anything happened to that boy—" He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. She waited, letting him gather himself. "I need to ask you something, and I need absolute honesty. Can you provide that?" "Yes, sir." "If a situation arose where my son was in danger, would you protect him? Would you put his safety above your own?" The question hung between them like a blade. This wasn't theoretical. This was a father preparing for worst-case scenarios, trying to ensure his child had every possible layer of protection. She met his eyes directly. "Without hesitation, sir. Without question. Even though I owe this family nothing. I made him a promise. I don't break promises to children." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of a kindred spirit who understood the weight of protection. "There's a situation developing. business matters that could become volatile. For the next few days, I need you to stay close to June, not as a maid, as his companion, his guardian when I cannot be." "Sir, surely trained security would be more appropriate." "Security can be compromised. Money talks, and my enemies have plenty of it. But you—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "You have something they can't buy. You care about him, not because I pay you, not because you're ordered to, because he matters to you as a person." She couldn't deny it. Somewhere in the past few days, this lonely child had worked his way into her heart.
"What do you need me to do?" "Be with him. In his room, during meals, throughout the day. If anything feels wrong, if you see anything suspicious, you tell me immediately. And if something happens—" He opened a drawer in his desk, pulled out a small device. "This is a panic button. One press sends an alert directly to my security team and to me. Keep it on you at all times." She took the device, the weight of it heavier than its physical mass suggested. "I understand." "One more thing." His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "If you betray this trust, if you're working with anyone who means my son harm, there is nowhere in this world you could hide. Do we understand each other?" "Perfectly, sir." That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the conversation, about the threats Yoo Joon-seo hadn't fully explained, about the panic button hidden in her pocket like a loaded gun, about June sleeping down the hall, completely unaware that his existence had become a tactical vulnerability in a war she didn't fully understand. She thought about Marcus, about the promise she'd made at his funeral, that she would never let another child feel invisible, unheard, unloved. That promise had brought her to Korea, had led her to this house, to this moment. She didn't believe in fate, but she believed in purpose. And maybe her purpose wasn't just to finish her degree or build a career. Maybe it was to protect a boy who needed someone to see him, to stand between him and a world that wanted to use his vulnerability as a weapon. The next morning, everything changed. Isabella woke to June's hand shaking her shoulder gently. She'd fallen asleep in the chair beside his bed after he'd asked her to stay while he read before sleep. The book, a Korean fairy tale translated into English, lay open on the covers. "Good morning," she signed, sitting up quickly. "Sorry, I didn't mean to fall asleep." "It's okay," he signed back, smiling. "You were tired. I watched you breathe for a while to make sure you were okay." The innocent observation made her chest tight. This child who'd been alone for so long had spent time just watching her breathe, making sure she was safe. "What do you want to do today?" she asked. His expression grew serious. "Can we go outside? To the garden? I never get to go outside." The request was simple, reasonable, but she remembered Yoo Joon-seo's warnings about threats, about the security measures keeping June essentially imprisoned in his own home. "Let me ask your father first." But before she could move, June's hand caught hers. His eyes held a sadness too old for his face. "He'll say no. He always says no. He thinks I'm safer inside. But I'm not safer. I'm just more alone." The truth of it hit her like a punch. Safety wasn't just about physical protection. It was about having a life worth protecting. And June's life had become so small, so confined, that she could see the slow suffocation happening in real time. "I'll figure something out," she promised. At breakfast, she broached the subject carefully. "Sir, I was wondering if I might take June to the garden this morning, just for an hour.
With security present, of course. Yoo Joon-seo looked up from his coffee, his expression unreadable. The garden isn't secure. Then what about the courtyard? The one with cameras covering every angle? Why does this matter? Because he's 7 years old and he needs sunlight. He needs to feel wind on his face. He needs to remember he's a child, not a prisoner. The word prisoner hung between them like an accusation. His jaw tightened. You're speaking out of turn. You asked me to protect him. I'm protecting him, just not from the threats you're focused on. For a moment, she thought she'd gone too far. Then something in his expression shifted, softened. 1 hour. The courtyard only. 2 guards present at all times, and you don't leave his side. Yes, sir. Thank you. The courtyard was small but beautiful. Stone pathways wound between carefully tended flower beds. A fountain bubbled in the center, the sound of water creating a peaceful backdrop. June's face when he stepped outside was pure joy. He tilted his head back, letting the sun touch his skin, and smiled so wide it looked like his face might split. Isabella watched him explore, touching flowers, examining stones, chasing a butterfly that danced just out of reach. The 2 guards stationed at opposite corners of the courtyard kept careful watch, but they seemed to relax slightly at the sight of the boy's happiness. For 20 perfect minutes, nothing went wrong. Then June spotted something near the back wall, a bird's nest, low enough that he could almost reach it. He signed to Isabella. "Can I look? Just for a second?" She nodded, following him across the courtyard. The guards tracked their movement but didn't intercede. It was just a child looking at a bird's nest.
What could possibly go wrong? Everything happened in the space of 3 seconds. June reached up toward the nest. A man appeared from behind a maintenance shed Isabella hadn't even noticed. His hand came up, and in that hand was a gun. The barrel rose toward June's small back. One of the guards shouted. The other was already moving, but they were too far away, too slow. Isabella's body reacted before her mind caught up. She threw herself between the gunman and the child, her arms wrapping around June's small frame. The first bullet hit her left shoulder, spinning her halfway around. The second caught her in the ribs, driving the air from her lungs. The third struck her chest, and the world exploded into white pain. She heard June screaming, felt his hands on her face, saw the guards finally reaching the gunman, tackling him to the ground. Heard more shouting, running, chaos erupting in all directions, but all she could focus on was June's face above her, his mouth forming words she could see but not hear, his tears falling onto her cheeks, mixing with her blood. "I promised," she tried to say, but no sound came out. "I promised I'd protect you." Then Yoo Joon-seo was there, his face appearing above June's, his expression shattered in a way she'd never seen before. His hands pressed against her wounds, trying to stop the bleeding, but there was so much blood. Too much. His mouth was moving, urgency in every line of his face, but the world was getting darker, quieter. The pain was fading into numbness. She could feel herself slipping, consciousness becoming optional. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her completely was June's hands signing desperately. "Don't leave me. Please don't leave me. You promised." "I know," she thought as the world went black. "I'm sorry." Isabella woke to the sound of machines beeping in steady rhythm. Her eyelids felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. When she finally forced them open, the first thing she saw was white ceiling tiles, then the edge of a medical monitor displaying numbers that meant nothing to her foggy brain. Pain radiated from 3 distinct points on her body, sharp and insistent, a reminder that she was alive even if she wished she weren't. She tried to move and immediately regretted it.
Fire shot through her shoulder, her ribs, her chest. A small sound escaped her throat, somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. Instantly, a hand gripped hers, small, warm, desperate. She turned her head slowly, every movement an effort. Joon sat beside the bed, his face pale and drawn, dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept in days. When he saw her looking at him, his expression crumbled with relief. "You're awake," he signed with one hand, refusing to let go of her with the other. "You're really awake. I thought you weren't going to wake up. The doctor said you might not wake up." "How long?" she signed back weakly. 5 days. You've been asleep for 5 days. Father brought in special doctors. They operated 3 times. You almost died. You kept almost dying." Tears streamed down his face, and she couldn't wipe them away because every muscle in her body screamed in protest when she tried to move. "I'm here," she managed to sign. "I kept my promise." The door opened and Yoo Joon-seo entered, followed by a doctor in a white coat. The man's expression when he saw her conscious was complicated. Relief mixed with something darker, something that looked like guilt. "She's awake," the doctor said unnecessarily, moving to check the monitors. "Miss Kingsley, can you hear me? Do you know where you are?" She nodded slightly. "You're in a private medical facility. You sustained 3 gunshot wounds, 1 to the shoulder, 1 to the ribs, and 1 to the chest that came within millimeters of your heart. You've lost a significant amount of blood and underwent multiple surgeries to repair the damage. Do you understand?" She blinked once. "Yes. The next 48 hours are critical. You're not out of danger yet, but the fact that you're conscious and responsive is a very good sign." He made notes on a tablet. "I'll give you a moment with your visitors, but keep it brief. She needs rest." The doctor left. Joon refused to move from her side, his hand still gripping hers like a lifeline. Yoo Joon-seo stood at the foot of the bed, his hands clenched at his sides, his face a mask of carefully controlled emotion. "The man who shot you is dead," he said quietly. "My security team killed him before he could fire again. We've identified who sent him. They're being dealt with as we speak." She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry, too damaged from the breathing tube they'd obviously removed recently. He seemed to understand. "Don't try to talk. The doctors say your voice will return, but it needs time." He moved closer, and she could see the exhaustion etched into his features. "You saved my son's life. You took 3 bullets meant for him. You threw yourself in front of a gun without hesitation." "Yes," she wanted to say. "Of course I did. That was always the plan." "My sister has been here," he continued. "She wants to meet you properly when you're stronger. She said, and I quote, 'That woman has more courage than your entire security team combined.'" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "She's not wrong." Joon's hands moved frantically. "Tell her about the plan. Tell her what you decided." Yoo Joon-seo looked at his son, then back at her. "When you're recovered, and you will recover, you won't return to work as staff. You'll be offered a permanent position as my son's companion and guardian. Full salary, your own quarters in the family wing, complete authority over his daily care and education, legal protection under my name." He paused. "This isn't a request. This is what's happening." She blinked once. Acceptance. Joon jumped up, his face transformed with joy, and immediately sat back down when a nurse appeared at the door and gave him a stern look. "The young master hasn't left this room for more than an hour at a time since you arrived," the nurse said, moving to check Isabella's IV. "He's been sleeping in that chair, eating meals here, refusing to go home. His father finally stopped arguing with him yesterday." Yoo Joon-seo's expression tightened. "He needed to know you were alive. We both did." Over the next 3 days, consciousness came and went in waves. Sometimes she'd surface to find Joon reading beside her bed, his lips moving as he practiced English words. Sometimes his father, practicing signs from a book with intense concentration. Sometimes nurses checking monitors and adjusting medications. And once, in the deep hours of night, she woke to find them both there, Father and son sitting together, the man's hand resting awkwardly on the boy's shoulder, while June slept with his head on her bed. The moment felt sacred, fragile, like a new family being born from the ashes of violence and sacrifice. On the fourth day, the breathing tube came out. The first words she spoke, rough and painful, were directed at June. "I'm here. I kept my promise." His tears soaked through her hospital gown as he clung to her, careful not to touch her injuries, but desperate for connection, for proof that she was real and staying and wouldn't disappear like everyone else in his life. "I saw everything," he signed when he finally pulled back. "On the security monitor, I saw them come at you. I saw you fight. I saw you fall. And I couldn't do anything. I was safe, and you were hurt, and it was my fault." "No," her voice was barely a whisper but firm. "Never your fault. My choice. I chose you. I would choose you 1,000 times. But you almost died. Almost. But I didn't. We're both here. Both safe. That's what matters." His father appeared in the doorway. "Can I come in?" She nodded. He entered slowly, as if entering sacred space. Then, with clear effort, he began to sign. The movements were slow, awkward, but the meaning was clear. "Thank you. For my son. For teaching me. For everything." June's mouth fell open. His hands flew in response. "Father, you did it! You said a whole sentence!" Yoo Joon-seo's face cracked into a smile, probably the first real smile in years. "I've been practicing. I have a teacher, someone who knows sign language well. She's been giving me lessons every evening." "Who?" June asked. "One of the nurses here. She has a deaf brother. When I told her I wanted to learn to communicate with my son, she volunteered immediately." He looked at Isabella. It seemed important. After everything. Over the next week, a pattern emerged. Mornings were for physical therapy, painful sessions where she relearned how to move her damaged body. June would sit nearby, encouraging her with signs and smiles. Afternoons were for rest, with June reading to her in halting English or telling her about his day in rapid sign language. Evenings were for the three of them together, with Yoo Joon-seo practicing his signs and June glowing with happiness at his father's efforts. The house staff came to visit. Mrs. Cho, who'd been so cold before, arrived with tears streaming down her face. "I was wrong about you. So wrong. I thought you were just another person passing through. I didn't see what you really were." "What's that?" Isabella asked, her voice still rough. "A guardian angel. That's what everyone's calling you now. The woman who took 3 bullets for the young master, who fought trained men with her bare hands, who kept her promise, even when it cost everything." Isabella wanted to argue that she wasn't any kind of angel, that she'd simply done what needed doing, but Mrs. Cho was already crying too hard to hear. Yoo Joon-seo's sister arrived on the 8th day. She was elegant, sharp-eyed, and immediately intimidating in a way that reminded Isabella of her father. But when she looked at Isabella, there was something like awe in her expression. "I told my brother for years that he needed to let people close to that boy, that isolation would destroy them both." She pulled up a chair, settling in like she planned to stay. "He never listened. Too afraid. Too traumatized by loss. Too convinced that love was a liability."
"I understand that," Isabella said quietly. "I know you do. That's why you're still here." The woman smiled. "I'm Yoo Min-seo, and I want you to know that what you did, throwing yourself in front of those bullets, I didn't do it to prove anything. I know, that's what makes it matter. Min-seo leaned forward. My brother is going to offer you more than just a job and quarters in the house. He's going to give you legal guardianship rights, access to family accounts, protection that extends to your own family back in Atlanta. He's going to make you untouchable. Do you understand what that means? Isabella shook her head slightly. It means you're going to become part of the Yoo family structure. Not staff, not an employee, family. And in our world, family means protection, power, and danger. Because the people who want to hurt my brother will see you as a legitimate target now. They'll know you matter. They'll know hurting you is a way to hurt him. The words settled over Isabella like a weight. She'd known intellectually that Yoo Joon-seo was dangerous, that his business interests weren't entirely legal, that enemies existed in the shadows. But hearing it stated so plainly made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Are you trying to scare me away? No. Min-seo said, I'm trying to make sure you know what you're agreeing to, because once you accept what my brother offers, there's no going back. You'll be bound to this family. Protected by it, yes, but also limited by it. Your freedom will have conditions. Your choices will have consequences that ripple beyond yourself. And if I say no, then you'll recover, receive generous compensation for your injuries, and be relocated somewhere safe with enough money to finish your degree and start whatever life you want. My brother would make sure of it. He may be dangerous, but he pays his debts. Her new quarters were in the family wing, just down the hall from June's room. The space was larger than her entire previous apartment, with a bedroom, sitting area, private bathroom, and a small study. Someone had already moved her belongings from her old studio, along with new clothes, books, and furniture that matched the rest of the family wing's aesthetic. June was waiting in the hallway when she arrived, practically vibrating with excitement. This is your room, he signed. Father says you're staying forever. Is that true? Yes, she signed back. I'm staying. He hugged her carefully, mindful of her still healing injuries, and she felt something in her chest expand. This boy, who'd been alone for so long now, had someone who was choosing to stay, not because she was paid to, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. That night, Yoo Joon-seo summoned her to his office. The room looked the same as it had weeks ago, but everything felt different now. She wasn't staff being warned about boundaries. She was something else entirely. Sit, he said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs across from his desk. She sat, still moving carefully, still aware of the pain that flared with certain movements. The investigation into the attack is complete, he began without preamble. The shooter was hired by a rival organization. They thought killing June would cripple me emotionally and create chaos in my operations. They were wrong on both counts. What happened to them? His expression went cold. They no longer exist. Their leadership has been eliminated, their operations have been absorbed or destroyed, and a message has been sent to every other organization in Seoul, touching my family results in total annihilation. The casual way he spoke about elimination and destruction should have terrified her. Instead, she felt a strange sense of security. This man would protect them with every resource at his disposal. You need to understand something, he continued. The world I operate in doesn't forgive weakness. It doesn't recognize civilians. And now that you're part of this family, you're no longer a civilian. You're a legitimate target. Your sister explained. Did she explain that there will be additional security protocols? That you'll have bodyguards when you leave the house? That your movements will be tracked, your communications monitored, your relationships vetted? No? Isabella admitted. Well, now you know. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. These are the legal documents formalizing your position. Guardian rights for June, access to family accounts, medical coverage, life insurance with your parents as beneficiaries. Everything is legitimate, documented, protected by the best lawyers in Korea. He slid the folder across the desk. She opened it, scanning the documents. The numbers were staggering, the protections comprehensive, the commitment absolute. There's one more thing, he said, and something in his voice made her look up. June has asked me to learn sign language seriously, not just basic phrases, full fluency. He wants to be able to have real conversations with me the way he does with you. That's wonderful. I'm hiring a tutor, 3 hours a day, every day. And I want you to join the lessons. I know you're fluent, but I want us to learn together. So he can see both his father and his guardian making the effort to reach him in his language. And he wanted to do it alongside her, creating a united front of people who loved June enough to meet him in his world. I'd be honored, she said quietly. Over the next month, life settled into a new rhythm. Mornings were for sign language lessons with an elderly tutor named Mr. Park, who had decades of experience teaching deaf children and their families. Yoo Joon-seo was a diligent student, practicing obsessively, making flashcards, watching videos, determined to achieve fluency as quickly as possible. June thrived. With both his father and Isabella learning his language, he became more animated, more confident, more like the child he should have been all along. He started venturing out of his room more, exploring the house, asking questions, showing curiosity about the world that had been locked away by isolation. Isabella continued recovering, slowly regaining her strength. The physical therapy was brutal, but she pushed through it, motivated by June's daily encouragement and by her own stubborn refusal to let the bullets define her. She also started to understand the world she joined. The business meetings Yoo Joon-seo attended weren't about legitimate enterprises. The men who visited the house weren't corporate executives. The security protocols weren't just paranoia. She was living in the heart of Seoul's criminal underworld, protected by one of its most powerful figures. And she'd chosen this knowingly. It should have scared her. Instead, it clarified things. She'd spent so long trying to be safe, to follow the rules, to build a predictable life. But safety hadn't saved Marcus. Rules hadn't prevented his death. And predictability had left her working minimum wage jobs to support a dream that felt increasingly hollow. Here, in this dangerous house with this lonely boy and his complicated father, she'd found something that mattered more than safety. She'd found purpose. 6 weeks after the shooting, everything changed again. Isabella was in the garden with June when she noticed a woman watching them from one of the upper windows. Not staff. The posture was wrong, the clothing too expensive. When Isabella looked up, the woman didn't look away. She just smiled, cold and calculating, and disappeared from view. Something about it sent warning signals through Isabella's nervous system. She took June's hand and signed, "We're going inside now. Why?" "I just want to check something," but when they reached the house, everything seemed normal. Staff going about their duties, security at their posts, no visible threats. She told herself she was being paranoid, that recovery had made her jumpy. Then she saw Yoo Joon-seo's face. He was in the main entrance hall, talking in low, intense tones with Min-seo. Both of them looked tense, and when they saw Isabella and June, their conversation stopped immediately. "Take June to his room," Yoo Joon-seo said. "Stay with him. Lock the door." "What's happening? Just do it. Now." The urgency in his voice left no room for argument. She took June upstairs, her heart hammering, her mind racing through possibilities. Once in his room, she locked the door as instructed and pulled out her phone, ready to call for help if needed. June signed, "What's wrong? Why is father scared?" "I don't know," she signed back. "But we're safe here, I promise." They waited. Minutes stretched into an hour. Isabella kept June occupied with a story, signing rapidly to distract him from the tension, but her attention was split between the narrative and the sounds of movement in the house below. Finally, a knock at the door. "It's me," Yoo Joon-seo's voice called. "Open up." She did, and he entered looking exhausted. His tie was loosened, his shirt slightly disheveled, signs of stress from a man who usually maintained perfect control. "There's someone here who wants to meet you," he said. "Someone who's made a very unusual request." "The woman in the window." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You saw her?" "Briefly. Who is she?" "Her name is Park Ji-young. She's the daughter of the man whose organization I destroyed after the attack on June." He ran a hand through his hair. "She's here to negotiate." "Negotiate what?" "Peace. Survival. She wants to merge what's left of her father's operations with mine, creating a unified structure under my leadership. In exchange, she's offering information about other threats against June and my family." Isabella processed this. Can she be trusted? "That's what we're trying to determine. My sister is conducting preliminary vetting. But Ji-young has specifically requested to speak with you." "Why me?" Because according to her intelligence, there are at least 3 other organizations planning moves against June. And she claims one of them has inside information. Someone in my household has been leaking details to my enemies. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Someone in this house, someone they saw every day, was actively working to harm June. Well, now you know. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. These are the legal documents formalizing your position: guardian rights for June, access to family accounts, medical coverage, life insurance with your parents as beneficiaries. Everything is legitimate, documented, protected by the best lawyers in Korea. He slid the folder across the desk. She opened it, scanning the documents. The numbers were staggering, the protections comprehensive, the commitment absolute. "There's one more thing," he said, and something in his voice made her look up. "June has asked me to learn sign language seriously, not just basic phrases, full fluency. He wants to be able to have real conversations with me the way he does with you." "That's wonderful. I'm hiring a tutor, 3 hours a day, every day, and I want you to join the lessons. I know you're fluent, but I want us to learn together so he can see both his father and his guardian making the effort to reach him in his language." The request was simple, but the meaning behind it was profound. Yoo Joon-seo wasn't just learning to communicate with his son. He was learning to be vulnerable, to be a student, to admit he didn't know something essential. "She wants to tell you directly," Yoo Joon-seo continued. "She says she'll only discuss the specifics with you, not with me. I don't know why, but I need to know if you're willing to hear her out." Isabella looked at June, who was watching them with confused concern, then back at Yoo Joon-seo. "If it helps protect him, yes, I'll talk to her." Park Ji-young was beautiful in a dangerous way. Sharp features, calculating eyes, expensive suit that probably cost more than Isabella's entire new wardrobe. She stood in Yoo Joon-seo's office like she owned it, exuding confidence despite being in enemy territory. When Isabella entered, Ji-young's expression shifted to something like curiosity mixed with respect. "The woman who took 3 bullets," Ji-young said in perfect English. "I've heard the stories. Some people think they're exaggerated. I think they're probably understated." "Why did you want to talk to me?" "Because you're the only person in this house who doesn't have divided loyalties. You're not part of the criminal infrastructure. You're not bound by old alliances or debts or power structures. You're here purely because you care about that boy." Ji-young moved closer. "That makes you the only person I can trust with certain information." "What information?" "There's a traitor in this household. Someone who's been feeding intelligence to multiple organizations, playing them against each other, creating chaos that benefits a larger player." "Who?" Ji-young smiled thinly. "If I tell you outright, you'll doubt me. You'll think I'm lying to serve my own interests. So instead, I'm going to give you the tools to figure it out yourself." She pulled out a tablet, brought up a series of documents. "These are encrypted communications between the traitor and their handler. I can't decrypt the full messages, but I can show you the metadata: timestamps, duration of calls, location pings from their phone." Isabella studied the screen. The timestamps showed calls happening at very specific times: early morning before most staff arrived, late night after everyone had gone to bed, during Yoo Joon-seo's regular business trips when the house was quieter. "Cross-reference those timestamps with who was in the house at those times," Ji-young said. "Eliminate anyone who wasn't here. Eliminate anyone who was with witnesses during the calls. What's left is your traitor." "Why not just tell Yoo Joon-seo?" "Because he won't believe me without proof. He's too smart to trust his enemy's word, even when his enemy is offering alliance. But you," Ji-young's eyes held Isabella's, "you can investigate without raising suspicion. You're new to this world. You ask questions because you're still learning. No one will think twice about it." Isabella wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. "And what do you get out of this?" "Proof that I'm valuable. Proof that aligning with me benefits the Yoo family, and," her voice softened slightly, "revenge against the people who killed my father. Not Yoo Joon-seo, he was just the weapon. I want the hand that wielded it. You're using us." We're using each other. Welcome to my world, Miss Kingsley. Welcome to survival.